Welcome to the Breakaway Entrepreneur Podcast, where master business coach Janet Fish and her special guests explore the characteristics and traits that lead entrepreneurs to success. Get ready for real conversations of what it takes to overcome real challenges and break away from your competition. Here's your host, Janet Fish.
Thanks, Ben. If you're an entrepreneur building your business, you're also building your email list. Your list is an asset, a huge asset to your business. In this episode, Henry Klauke and I explore how to increase your email list, how to effectively use your list, and how to get people to open your emails, and much, much more. Just a quick note, you're going to hear my dogs barking and running down the hall a couple of times during this interview. I contemplated editing it out, and then I thought, why? As an entrepreneur who works from home, welcome to my life. Just keeping it real. I hope you enjoy our chat. All right, good afternoon, Henry Klauke. I'm super excited to be chatting with you today, and Happy New Year. This is my first interview podcast of the year, so I'm looking forward to it. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jana. Yeah, thanks for asking. It's a beautiful day. Yeah, the new year starting off strong.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll talk a little bit about what you're going to do in the new year, different and whatnot. So,
all right.
First of all, let me just introduce who you are. I love guests who come on and give me a short bio, and some of them give me like a whole page. And this is a great way to start. So, Henry assists technology challenged entrepreneurs to attract and nurture their next 100 ideal prospects, which is done through done for you email campaigns. So, it's always one of my goals for every year is to increase my list, right?
Right.
And this year is no different, right? And that's clearly your alley. That's your expertise. And I love the next ideal prospect. So talk a little bit more about what you do and how you help entrepreneurs get clear on getting new and better prospects.
Sure, no problem, Jana. Yeah, it's great to be here. And starting it off right on a perfect question, one that people ask me all the time. How do I find the right people? And that's the key with copywriting, which is selling in the written word. That's all it is. Not only, yes, you want to attract people, but you actually want to repel the wrong people, right? So if you're a very high-end product, you don't want to attract the people who are cheap, for instance, who just are not willing to pay for your services because they're never going to hire you anyway, even if you bring them in. At that point, it's just a pissing contest, so to speak, of, oh, I've got a bigger list. It's like, well, how much money are you really making from your list? So it's really, to answer your question more directly, it's about market research. So it's becoming very, very clear on who exactly you want to target. And, something that people have hesitation on, some of my clients before working with me is, I want to help as many people as possible. And they want to have a really big view. And it's like, well, the cool thing about niching down and being very specific, let's say, like, for example, mine is technology challenge entrepreneurs. And I even go further sometimes in technology challenge coaches and consultants. Mm-hmm. And so if there's a technology challenge coach out there, they're going to say, wow, this is speaking right to me. And you're going to get more of their attention. But then on the other side, this is what people don't realize is they say, well, I'm okay with technology and technically I'm not a coach, but could you still help me?
Right.
And you, of course, say yes.
Well, and I love what you say because I definitely fell to this early on my career, my sales career, if you will, taking on any clients. And now I'm very, very, I have a couple of levels of clients because I've got some online stuff that's for the people who aren't ready to make the big commitments. I've got some group stuff and I've got, the private coaching. But I love the idea because most entrepreneurs don't think about repelling the wrong clients, like making sure that you really absolutely. So market research is one. Where do you, so you mainly talk about done for you email campaigns. So you're really not talk a little bit more about that because that is one marketing strategy, right? Talk a little bit more about, because I've heard you oftentimes on our Zoom calls and whatnot, talk a little bit more about how people can effectively use emails. And then I want to talk a little bit more about list building, because I love list building.
All right. Well, yeah, in terms of email campaigns, I like to lead with that. That's really in the middle of the road for my services and really where people are at. I see, looking at my own marketplace, there's really three levels. First level is when I'm dealing with technology challenge folks. There could be a lot of resistance, and so they're not even ready for emails yet. So I just say, okay, well, what if? Go ahead.
Just further define what you mean when you say technology challenged, because that can be like a super broad. So what does that mean to you as far as the clients that you're looking to work with? Because I can be technology challenged over here, like Instagram, which is my new go-to thing, right? But I can build website pages. So when you say technology challenged, go a little deeper on what that means to you.
Right. Hey, maybe it's worth me changing my messaging too, if it's not clear enough. But the idea is, we all saw what happened in 2020, and a lot of people were basically pushed online.
Right.
And they're like, here, this is where you have to do business now. Sorry. You can't do it face to face anymore. And so I was really looking for those folks, coaches and consultants who are excellent and they're used to that belly to belly stuff. But now they're on this new platform, and it's more of a technology overwhelm. Mm-hmm. That might be the right question, where it's like, oh, there's so many new platforms, and now I have to learn an email list. How am I supposed to do that? So it's folks who they're intimidated by it. They see that it's a lot to learn, that it's a useful skill, but hey, they'd rather hire a young buck like Henry, for instance. So
it's primarily around crafting email campaigns.
Right, or just online marketing in general. Like some people, they know how to use Facebook as a user, but not necessarily as a business owner, and all the Facebook ads manager. That's a whole nother deal.
Sure.
The business account stuff.
And so you do all of that.
I dabble in the Facebook ads stuff. It's not my expertise, but between you and I, Janet, and our audience, it's all psychology, right? So. Right. I just like emails because it can help the most people, no matter where you're at, small or huge companies.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, to me, I might have been doing this for 15 years, over 1,000 clients, so I have a little bit of experience with entrepreneurs. I don't care what. I primarily coach around marketing strategies. So I've got your 10 steps to building a business, and there's hiring, there's systems, and there's all these other things. But at the end of the day, if you don't have an email list, then that's a huge asset, right? It is the asset, because I could sell that to somebody. When I decided to retire, let's say, I could sell my database of coaching clients or prospects to somebody, and that has value, right?
Yeah, right. So, you really could. And that's like the idea of what gives companies value nowadays is really intellectual property.
Yeah.
And a list, I would say, goes into that.
Absolutely. So to me, there's a lot of marketing strategies, and I always have my clients have 4 to 6 marketing strategies. But at the cornerstone of that is typically getting a name and email address. Like that's usually step number 1. Maybe step number 2, like for me, is to getting somebody on a phone call to talk to them about my services. Like especially right now, I'd get them on a Zoom call. I probably wouldn't get them in a coffee shop talking about it. But email is just such a cornerstone of what I think entrepreneurs need to do. Talk a little bit more about how you build a list, and what you do with a list, and how to effectively use a list, because I think that's really powerful, tactical things that people need as they build their businesses.
You got it. And, before I get into that, I want to talk about Facebook ads, because I mentioned it very briefly.
Yep.
Just because I think it'll be valuable. Is a lot of people rush to get to Facebook ads. They're like, oh, I got to do Facebook ads. It's like, well, you can burn a lot of cash running Facebook ads if you're not careful. And the idea is you want to have something that's tested and working on a warm audience, and a warm audience is your email list.
Right.
So once you have that in place, it's working, your cash register is ringing, then it's like, oh, now I can scale this to what we call cold traffic, people who don't know you very well or
Yeah.
at all on Facebook.
That's a
Ads.
super valuable thought right there, because I think too many people, I started out like, I'm just going to go do some Facebook ads, and I failed miserably.
Right.
And I didn't spend a lot of money, but I started to spend money. And then I was like, no, I think you're absolutely right. Great point. Like, I need to figure out what message resonates before I go and spend any money to get to that cold audience. So that's a perfect tip. I love that.
You got it. It's not a sandbox. So I'll wrap it up into that. You don't want to play around in Facebook ads, because it'll just cost you way too much, where you can do that elsewhere and then bring it to the big leagues. But in terms of how to build the email list, I'm sure you've mentioned this probably before on the podcast, but the way that's working right now, and I don't think it'll ever stop working, is what we call a lead magnet, where you give something away for free or near free in return for an email address and a name and any other contact information you can get. It's really that simple. I mean, there's other ways to do it. What I've seen that's pretty cool is Facebook groups. You can actually set up questions as an admin. So it's like, okay, before you join the group, you have to answer a few questions, and it could be like, oh, how much does your business make per year? You can make it whatever you want. And then a lot of people do, what's your email address, as one of the questions. So that's another way.
I'm writing that one down.
Yeah.
Because usually, I mean, I didn't even know that. I knew you could ask questions, but I didn't know that you could actually ask for email addresses. Because I think a lot of people like me, I mean, I've got a Facebook group, and it's relatively new because of some changes, the podcast, so it's like a year old. But I'm thinking, I get a Facebook group, they join my Facebook group, and then I have to give them a lead magnet, and then they opt in. But I can skip that step completely, so I'm writing that one down, because that's a great tip.
You got it. And, I haven't done it myself, but I believe it's very manual. Like, you make it a question, and you're going to have to go back in later and add it in. So there's a step on your end on the back end, but hey, that's easier
to do
than giving your customer an extra step.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. That's awesome. That's great. And
then, second part of your question was, what do you do with the list once you have it? Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's really, I was talking about the 3 levels that I have. The middle level is, okay, how do you grow your list, get new people in? And that's the campaigns, where it's essentially, I call it's an asset. It's an asset, really, where what an email campaign is a number of emails in a row that are pre-written, and as soon as they opt into whatever it is, to your lead magnet, they're going to start getting these emails every day, every couple days, to stay in touch, and it's all leading to that next step.
And that is the do it for you, done by Henry stuff that you do.
Right. So I'll write those emails. It'll be just basically a combination of testimonials, stories, other knowledge, industry knowledge. You can help the folks. It's all going to the same place, which is usually a discovery call.
Yeah.
And then, so that's all well and good. You get new people in, and some people join on that call. But then there's the question is, okay, now I've got this big list. The sequence is over, right? They've already seen the 10 or 15. Now what? Right? Or they've already bought from me. They're already clients of mine. Now what? They're just sitting there. And so that's the deal where you can just promote yourself, and things like a podcast are so great to have, because you can send a reminder every single week. Hey, I've got Henry on this week. Don't miss it, sort of thing. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it's people who know you the best. And, that's just, it gets easier that way, where at the beginning, you really have to have catchy subject lines and juicy hooks. But eventually the juicy hook becomes your name. If I see an email from Janet and I'm like, oh, I know Janet has some great value always, I don't care what the subject line is necessarily. I'm going to click on it.
So talk a little bit about best practices around email. So you talked about cadence. So how often? And let's not talk about let's focus on the ongoing campaign, not necessarily the first sequence campaign, because that's a lot harder to get general about, right? If someone opts in, and I want to see an initial sequence. I think that takes a little bit of working with Henry to figure out what that might look like. But now they're done with that sequence, and they're either customers or they're not customers, or they're customers, but I want to upsell them to the next thing. Talk about some best practices. Talk about cadence, how often. Talk about open rate. Talk about how much content versus ask. Because I have a formula that I talk about for that, but I'd be really interested to hear. So talk about some of those best practices around email, because I think the daunting part is we don't know what to do.
Right.
So we don't do anything.
That's fair to say. And I think those are probably my top 3 questions I get asked, which is why I go there. Each of those is a chapter of my upcoming book, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
We'll talk about that. Good plug, though.
All right. Yeah. Just sprinkle that in there, food for thought. Tuck that away for later. But okay, so how often to send? Man, this one's always a doozy, because the answer is so unfulfilling. It depends,
I know.
Right? But I'll go deeper than that. If you're not sending any marketing emails at all, if your list is just sitting there, just start with once a month. I mean, you can carve out time to write 1 email a month,
right.
Updates on what you're doing. It's better than nothing. And really, the other answer to that is as much as possible. So everyone's list is a little bit different. People like to be communicated with differently. But here's the deal. So talking back to our once a month example, let's say I have a busy day that whenever you send your monthly email. So I'm not going to get in contact with you for another whole month, right? Some people are like, oh, I'm bombarding my list. And it's like, well, what's going to land is what's going to land. So if I'm getting an email every day from you, Janet, let's say it's maybe I'll read one every twice a week. Hey, that's way better than once a month. And the goal is not to have everyone open every email. It's not going to happen.
That would be a great goal, but I don't know how realistic it is.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. I mean, some people have high open rates, but high meaning 50%.
Yeah, that's pretty high. What is your standard open rate? Would you say 30%, 20, 30?
20 to 30 is like an very broad industry standard. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I had a lady who was like, how do I get my open rate higher? It's at 28%. I'm like, that's very high. You got to get more people in. And see, that's the idea of okay, we're dealing with numbers here. That 28%, it could be 100 people, 28 people are opening, and that's a good rate. So then at that point, it's like, let's bump that up. So you have more people opening it, but not necessarily more percent of those people. Right. If that makes sense.
Yeah. The greater the number of people in your database, the greater number of people will open it for sure. Mm-hmm. But exactly. Hey, I think for my stuff, and I don't do it very often, and which is one of my go-tos for 2021, is if I get 10% or 15%, I'm pretty darn happy about that, right?
Yeah.
Because so also talk about segmentation, because I actually am in the process right now of changing CRMs, if you will, because I wanted some more powerful. And so yesterday I was importing all my stuff from my old one to my new one, and resegmenting. And so talk about the power of that. First, what it is, because people might not even know what that is.
Sure.
And then how you use that in an email campaign.
Right. So segmenting, it's basically just different, how to break your audience down further. So it's okay, everyone on the list is a fan of what I do in some respect. Right. But I think really the simplest one is clients versus non-clients, right. Clients versus prospects. If you have different, different products, for example, a great friend of mine, Jim Conley, he's a business coach. So he focuses on one side is leadership for corporate, more or less. And the other side is sales, also for corporate, but also entrepreneurs as well. So it's he's going to have 2 segments. Right. The leadership segment and the sales segment. And then eventually he can start crossing them later.
I segment customers and prospects. But then I segment what product, group coaching versus private coaching versus buying my online stuff. And then I also segment, and I don't know how wise this is, but I now tag them instead of having separate lists, which is part of the reason I'm changing software. But I tag them by campaign. So and a lot of times I'll want to email all of them, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but whether they, I have like 3 lead magnets, right? So I might want to just send an email to people who got the toolkit lead magnet, but I might also want to send an email to, like, if I'm going to do a weekly podcast, I want everybody in my list to get that. And so segmentation helps, but you can that's why I changed, because now I can do any iteration of that where I couldn't do that before. So anyway, let's get out of the weeds.
Okay, well, I'll just finish that up with just saying, just like you said, it's great to have it when you need that, but for the most part, sometimes you'll just send to everybody,
pretty much,
which is an option too. And just the difference between tags and segmentation. Yeah, I'll stay out of the weeds as well, but there's a difference. There is a difference, and tags is more for automation stuff. That'll be like my very simple answer.
All right. Okay, perfect. So we talked about how often, and any thoughts for open rate, because it doesn't matter. So we've talked about what an open rate. So let me rephrase that. Any thought on subject line to get open rate? Because I know you got all this stuff. Like, how do I get people to open my best practices on how to get people to open my emails?
Right. Well, testing always comes into play, as us marketers love. So if you notice a pattern, it's cool to look a lot of these ESPs, email service providers. They track like so much, which is so fun. So it's cool sometimes to go in there and say, like, wow, this subject line fit, like, way more people opened it than usual. So it's like, what was it about that people like, that your list likes? Because every list is a little differently. But overall, the idea is you got to strike curiosity. So one of my favorite tenets of copywriting in general, and this applies to email, of course, is what's the purpose of the subject line? It's to get them to click, to get them to open the email. So you don't want to give it all away. You don't want to make it too boring or bland. But then once they're inside, the point of the first sentence is for them to read the second sentence. So you're always have to keep that in mind. You never want to assume someone's going to open your email or read your stuff. So it's like challenging yourself. How can I make this as valuable as possible? I think the probably the easiest way to do that is, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
How can you bring that up front and center instead of, it's very different from an email you might send to a friend because they know you, they might be expecting the email, and it might subject line be like introduction or something, but that's not going to work. That's not going to work for your list.
Right. So intriguing, and I love what you said, because it's a step-by-step process. First, I got to get them to click, but once they click, I got to get them to read past the first sentence, right?
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of best practices, I guess, around short emails and bulleted points and all those kind of things. And I'm a less is better. If I open up an email and I see some litany of stuff, I'm like, I don't have time for that, so I move on. Right. But the next question I'll ask is, so like I said, I have my rule of thumb, but how much good content and how often should I ask? So how many, that whole proportion of giving me information versus asking me to do something.
Okay. Yes. This is another great topic, one that I explore in my book, but,
plug number 2 for the book. I love it. Yes.
It's all this stuff people ask me, and I go on podcasts. It's like, I might as well just write this stuff down.
I love it.
Yes. So,
we'll tell you how you can get access to that in a little bit.
Yes. But, so people, how often should I have a call to action? Okay. My somewhat controversial answer is every single email should have a call to action. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to hand you your credit card, but the idea is to have them used to clicking on some sort of link to go somewhere, right? So for you, Janet, it might be, check out this episode of the podcast, click here. But to that point, I like to do about, every 4 emails, it's 3 value emails and then a sales email. Or you could do like more 80-20 rule, right? Where it's 4 emails of value. The 5th email is a sales letter. But you want to make sure there's a link in all of those. So the value could be a blog post. It could be really anything.
Well, and I love that. Mine is 1 to 5 or 1 to 6.
Right.
But we're in the same ballpark. And I do that without really thinking about it because I'm sending them somewhere to get these. And typically it could be my podcast, but it could be a link to Pew Research talking about, I don't know, podcasts, number of podcast listener, whether the podcasts are growing or getting smaller. It could be a link to, Ryan Dice from Digital Marketers list of 10 or the 10 best subject lines, or so I mean it could be a link. But I love that because I didn't really think about it consciously, but it's you're teaching people how to click the link.
Yes.
So when the link is to go buy my course, they're clicking the link.
Right. The psychology says, wow, whenever Janet sends me a link, it's packed full of great value. So I'm going to click on it. It's like, I don't want to say training your list, but it's almost like training them.
I think it is.
Building that trust.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just think that it is, I mean, you're teaching people to do what you want them to do. And
exactly.
I mean that in a really good way. And they don't mind, I would think, if they're getting good content, then they're happy to click on that link.
Yeah, exactly. Because the 2 extremes, right, is everyone knows the extreme of every email is a pitch. And you're like, get this out of my inbox. This is ridiculous. The other end of that, though, is people just value so much that when it actually is a sales email, it's out of place and it's odd. It's like, this doesn't fit. And so they won't buy.
Yeah. Those are great. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask you about, so we're 10 months into a pandemic or whatever it is. How has that changed what you do? Or I'll ask it this way. What things will you be doing differently in 2021 because of what you've experienced in the last 10 months?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I mean, I've been online even before the pandemic. So not a ton has changed for me, but in terms of, what the marketplace is looking for, I think nowadays, mid 2020, people are like, it'll all blow over in the fall, we'll be back together. But now people really realize like this stuff's here to stay.
Yeah.
People are still going to be online, doing business online in a whole new way. Even if we are to go back to, whatever semblance of a year ago looked like, there's a lot of folks, who I know, and I'm sure you've seen this too, which is I'm saving tons of money on travel. I'm going to stay online. So really for me, it's upping my online networking. I mean, that's how we met.
Sure.
And it's just a great resource for me.
I don't think it's going away either.
It's not going away.
I'm not getting in the car and driving around like I used to. If I can just jump on a Zoom call, and it's not quite the same, but for most of the things, I'm okay with that. Like the trade-offs are something that I'd be willing to do. There are certain instances where that might not be the case, but man, the number of people that I've met, like you, I would have never met if we hadn't been running into Zoom calls and all of that. So I love that. I think that you're spot on. One of the areas that I'm looking at really expanding is those people who are realizing, because some of them, we all kind of thought it wasn't going to last this long, but they're realizing that their jobs aren't going to go away. and they want to start a new company or start a new business. And I know how to do that backwards and forwards. And so that's an area that I'm really exploring because I think there's going to be a lot of that going forward. Okay, so let's talk about the book. 23 insider tips for more email clicks, credit card swipes, and raving fans. Yeah. I love that. Talk a little bit more about the book.
So that's the subtitle. You missed the title, which is
I'm sorry.
Inbox Income.
Inbox Income. I'm so sorry. Let me do that over. Hey, Let's talk. Well, I probably won't edit it out, but let's talk about the book. Inbox Income. I love that. 23 insider tips for more email clicks, credit card swipes, and raving fans.
Right.
Talk about it.
Yeah. So, oh man, it's been a heck of a roller coaster. You know, I'm a part of a group with Eric Lawfoam.
I know Eric.
Yeah, Eric. So
Eric is really the one who encouraged me to start a podcast December of 19.
There you go.
So
yeah, he's awesome.
He is awesome. He's been on this podcast before.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Episode, like I should have it all written down. Episode, whatever. But yeah, I've had him on. Anyway,
excellent.
Go ahead.
So you're familiar with Eric, and so he's got this awesome course called How to Write a Book in a Day. It's like, wow, you know, what a great title. First of all, since we're talking marketing, most people don't get their books done in a day. I didn't, but I got like 7,000 words. That's not bad. Not a bad start. And so I realized, like, wow, I can actually do this. And just the stuff that came out of it, right, just from being asked these questions and doing all the learning I continue to do on marketing and email marketing, it all had to come out. So I talk a lot about the breakdown of an email that, you know, talk about getting into the weeds, but it's like the subject line, the lead, which is like the first 20% of any message. And in an email, that's like a couple sentences, right?
Right.
So that's very important. The body, what's in the middle, and then the call to action at the end. I talk about all that in great detail. And then of course the take a step back. Okay, how do I run a campaign? What kind of software is out there? And what am I going to need? And then the last section that I gave away, probably most of the last section is most asked questions.
Yeah.
Explore those.
So I know it's not out until March of 2021. We're in until March. I'm still getting used to that. How can people get on an email list to get the book, or are you giving any kind of a like free chapter to get people on that? Anyway, how are you building your list around that? How do people get access to it when it's out? Because I want to get on that list and I want to get access to it too.
All right. Well, yes, the book about emails does have an email list, of course. And I just invite people to join. You know, I just give updates on the book and writing tips until launch day. So I believe we have that link. I don't have a pretty link yet. Inboxincome.com is like $4,000 or something. So I'm like, maybe that's not worth it right now.
Yeah, so, got it.
But I'll figure it out, and I'm sure I'll give that link to you, Janet. But
okay, so we'll create a link. There'll be a link in the show notes to a way to get some cool information and then be notified when the book comes out, because I'm super excited about that. All right, any final thoughts for people as we start this new year? Any final thoughts for entrepreneurs that are technology challenged?
Yes. Oh man. I would say you don't have to have everything at once. My gosh. And I say this for myself as well, because sometimes I feel like, I still need this and that and this and that. You know, I still don't have my website set up, and I figured, you know, it's more important to go out and get clients than it is to have every single thing in place. So you just give yourself some grace and say, you know, I'm going to work on this one thing. If that's email marketing, great. If it's not, you know, you can work on that email marketing later. You know, it's always going to be there for the foreseeable future. I
totally agree. I would say up there on the top should be list building.
Yes.
Right. That's not something I would say, wait. I totally agree with the website and all of that, and I would totally agree if you're out in Zoom rooms getting clients, I wouldn't worry about an email list, right? But I'm just I think building your email list is so powerful. And if you're in a Zoom room, I mean, I do this all the time, and I find somebody I'm interested in it, like I private message you. Like didn't I private message you and say, do you want to come on my podcast?
Yes, I think that's
Like,
how it happened.
like he's giving a presentation on this cool stuff in some Zoom room I'm in, and I'm like, I want Henry on my podcast. So I did a private message in the chat of that Zoom room, and like you had already emailed me before like the chat was even done. So you can build your list on a Zoom call, right? By just saying, hey, I'd love to learn more. Here's my email address, or give me your email address and let's connect.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be high tech. Like, okay, I'll truly leave with this is, people talk about CRMs, right? And they're like, oh, I don't have a CRM, whatever. CRM, what it stands for is customer relationship management or client relationship management. It doesn't mean a customer relationship management that's also technology focused. Like, I know people who have it on like note cards, like analog. As long as you have something, and then eventually, yes, you can put that onto a technology. But like it's like a salad, right? If you get the contact info, you get the salad, and you put it in the fridge for a few days, it's gonna go bad. You want to start nurturing it right away. Otherwise, people are gonna be like, Henry who? Janet who? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, is to start small. Start where you are.
Start small, yeah.
Because I see a lot of people who get overwhelmed, and I talk a lot about mindset on this podcast. And it's interesting how we as humans can use the fact that I need these 8 things to use that as an excuse to not do any of them.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly
I mean, I encounter that all the time, and I really work really hard with my clients to simplify, as I'm sure you do too. Here's the 2 things or 3 things you need to do so that you actually do them. Because I like to say, this is my like tagline of the podcast is success starts with your mindset, but it takes massive action to get you there.
You said it.
And if you're in overwhelm, you're not in massive action. So, all right, Henry, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Got it.
Shoot, I'm like, we could go on for another hour. But yes. I just am happy that you spent some time with me. I really appreciate your brilliance, and it was great connecting with you again. We'll get some information on the book in the show notes, and I'm sure I'll see you on a Zoom call soon.
All right. Thanks, Jen.
All right, great. Take us out, Ben.
Thank you for listening to the Breakaway Entrepreneur Podcast. If you like the show, please rate, recommend, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts so we can share more actionable insights with the entrepreneur community. Until next time, challenge your mindset, be bold, take action, and financial freedom will follow. You can get helpful resources and templates to guide and inspire you from Janet's free Breakaway Entrepreneur Toolkit. Get it now by going to www.breakawaybusinesscoaching.com/toolkit.